All right, everyone, welcome to the first lesson of our deep dive on building AI agents. And obviously, we're going to be focusing on N8N. That's what I pretty much build all the agents on. So, we're going to get started here. The first thing I wanted to talk about is going to be triggers. So, the reason we're talking about this first is because that's pretty much how every AI agent workflow that you're going to build, every automation that you're going to build ever, is going to start with a trigger. So, what is a trigger? It is just something, it's a node that we set up in here, and there's many different types of triggers. But this is the node that decides, okay, the rest of this workflow now, the logic is all going to execute. So let's click on add first step and we can see what triggers this workflow. A trigger is a step that starts your workflow. There's a ton of different ways that we can have triggers. So let's quickly talk about a few things. So we've got a manual trigger. We can have things happen on event. And sorry, a manual trigger just means there's literally going to be a button that says test workflow, trigger the workflow. We can have certain things happen in events. So run the flow when something happens in an app like Telegram, Notion, or Airtable. As you can see, we click into here and there's just a ton of different integrations, which is why one of the things about why N8N is so great. Look how many things we have that are easily integrated. So, for example, a basic use case of like an email manager type of agent, we could click on our Gmail and then the trigger here is on message received. So if we clicked on this, we'd set up our account, and every minute this node will be searching your Gmail, waiting for information to come in. And then when it gets a message received, it'll output over here. And then let's say we had a ton of different nodes coming this way, data manipulation, AI agents reading it, responding to it, that kind of stuff. It would all happen after this trigger goes off where it captures an email. So we've got something like a Gmail trigger. Um, we've also got, okay, give me a sec. Let's just get rid of this guy. Add first step. Let's look at more triggers. So we've got on a schedule. So you're able to set a certain time. You're able to set a frequency. Let's say every morning at 9 a.m. you want this trigger to go off, and it's going to go search the internet, and it's going to send your team a quick, sort of like the morning brew type of thing, where it sends like, here's what's going on in the market or within our industry, or here's a review of all of yesterday's meetings, that sort of stuff with this schedule trigger. On a webhook call. So a webhook is, we'll get more into it over this series, but webhooks, APIs, HTTP requests, all of that kind of stuff. I remember when I first started looking at automation and AI agents, I thought that stuff was super, super confusing. So for now, let's just talk about a webhook. A webhook is basically just think of it as something that's constantly watching one area, which would be this URL, this sort of endpoint that we're specifying. And it's going to be constantly listening right here to see if anything changes. So you could have a webhook be a form within your website, which would be this node is watching for anytime someone submits a form. And then it would trigger the rest of the workflow. So let's keep with that example of a form. Let's say you have a form on your website, you connect it to N8N using this webhook URL. If someone fills out a form, you can have the rest of the workflow automatically grab that, take their name, take their email, take the information they filled out, write them a little welcome message, and then send them a text, say, hey, we got your form. Thanks for signing up. Something like that. So that's kind of a webhook. Kind of similar to HTTP requests because we're going out to access a different service. So, like we're looking for an event to take place somewhere else, not in N8N. And with an HTTP request, we're doing that similarly, where we're either sending a request somewhere or we're sort of getting information back from a different service. So for now, let's just keep it as simple as that, but we can dive into that stuff later. So that's a webhook. We've also got a form submission, which would be like an in N8N environment form. So hold on, give me a sec here. We can look at this form, which would be the one that we would have just set up in N8N. Obviously, there's nothing here right now, but that's sort of a similar aspect of like the webhook. This is just integrated in by N8N. We would set up a description. We would set up the different fields to have the user fill out, all that kind of stuff. So good for a testing environment. And then on chat message, this is a really simple one. This would pretty much just be, hey, we're talking to the agent right here. Obviously, nothing's going to come back because we have no logic, but that's a trigger because anytime a message is received within N8N, the workflow would take place. So there's that. And then a really, really cool one that's going to be kind of unique to N8N. And one of the reasons why I was playing with Make and Zapier before I quit my full-time job, I was using Alteryx. That's sort of why I have a good understanding of like just workflow automation tools in general. But what's really cool about N8N is that you're able to do when called by another workflow. So This is a trigger that basically is almost like a webhook within n8n. So let's say we have logic taking place over here. Let's say that we're grabbing information, we're setting some fields, and then we're going to send it off to like an OpenAI node to actually um, like do something with the data that's coming in. So what's really cool is that we could have a different workflow in n8n. Let's say we had a workflow up here where we're going to manually trigger something, and we're going to talk to like an AI agent. So what we can do here is the agent, let's say its job is to do stuff in Calendar and email and Google Sheets. So we would have like this tool would be, let's say this is an email tool. So this is an email tool. And then let's say we want to give it another tool, which is a calendar tool. And obviously this is just like not actually going to be functioning, but anyways. So what we're doing here is we have these tools are call n8n workflow. So when the agent realizes, okay, I need to do something in email, it's going to send information to this tool and wait for a response back. What's actually going on is that we built this tool in n8n. So it's going to send, let's say we said, can you send an email to Nate? It's going to take this query and send it to this tool. And then coming in right here is going to be a query that says, send an email to Nate. And then it will go through this logic, actually send the email, and then it will respond back to the agent saying that we just sent that email off to Nate. So we'll get into examples and stuff like that. Hopefully that makes sense. I'll show you sort of a more in-depth one where we're actually using that trigger. Most of the time when we're doing agents, we do a lot of stuff where we're building out workflows like that, and we're sending information off to another workflow, which is cool because then you have a workflow built out in n8n as a tool already that you're able to link up to multiple agents or multiple different workflows. So that's pretty much what it looks like. You have other things like email trigger. It's a different one that's built into n8n. You've even got n8n APIs. You've got local files. You can do error workflows, which is basically you could connect this trigger two different workflows. And then if there's ever an error in that workflow, it will trigger this workflow that will send an email to your team, send a Slack message, say, hey, there's an error in workflow 1.2. The error message we got was blank, and it happened at this time. So just a high level, that's sort of the way that what triggers are, what they do, how they work. And now we're going to sort of dive into a few other actual examples of looking at triggers. So